Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures Daily Dose of Nature. Today's topic: Exploring the Kingdom of the Killer Whale, presented by NatHab Expedition Leader Eric Ramirez. I'm your host, Rob Mess. Thank you for joining us here today. Over to you, Eric.
Thank you so much again for that incredible presentation, Rob. So I'm going to introduce myself again. My name is Eric Ramirez, and today's topic is exploring the kingdom of killer whales. So before I started, if you recognize I have a funny accent, yes, I have it because I'm Mexican living in Germany. I just recently moved a few months ago. And I think, and if you have to watch before some of my webinars, you know that this is my most iconic phrase that I like to share among all my guests and also my friends and family. Life is an unexpected journey, and indeed, you never know where it starts and when it's going to end, and the places where you're gonna visit throughout this time. So I started my journey studying marine biology in Baja Peninsula when I was 18, and I was so fascinated of different marine organisms. And my way led me to study sharks for 2 years and a half. And once I finished my studies, I started to work in a lab with genetics, and I was thrilled because I was working as a scientist finally. But then I felt that something was missing, and I decided to take another route in my life, and I became an expedition leader in La Paz, leading trips to see whale sharks, sea lions, and all kind of stuff in the Sierra Cortez. I already got a webinar about this, and if you want to watch it, I highly recommend you Jules of the Sierra Cortez. But in my entire trips there, I have watched different type of species of marine mammals, different type of whales like fin whales, humpbacks, of course, gray whales, blue whales. But one of the most beautiful encounter that I had was with a pod of killer whales. I will tell you what's a pod in a couple of minutes. But I was next to the in a boat just watching some killer whales, and I was very young. I was more naive, unaware, with less experience. And the first thing that I did, without hesitation, I just jumped to the water and I swam towards them. I was absolutely terrified because when I was at school, my professor of marine mammals told me that, okay, Eric, killer whales are the top predators. There's nothing above them. They're on top of the food chain. So I was excited, but at the same time I was very very afraid. And and yeah, that was my experience. But um, I was wondering, I jumped without knowing anything about them. And after a lot of years, right now I decided to investigate more and to bring you this webinar about killer whales. For me, after I did my research, I realized that these organisms are just fascinating. They blew my mind so many aspects, and I certainly I just ruled out how intelligent they are. And I'm gonna start with this. Okay, this is part of our history in movies. We have two blockbusters. We have on the right side Jaws, and we have on the left side Free Willy. If you watch these movies, you know what I'm talking about. But these two movies, they just drove us to different, completely separated ways. In the case of the Jaws, they just planted a seed of freight to the ocean because we believe that sharks are these killer machines, these bloodthirsty animals that are just hunting humans all the time. And the reality that is not true. But unfortunately, our brains sometimes they cannot distinguish between reality and fiction. At the end, they're just images that we are taking, and sometimes we have no much criteria of what is the reality and what is not. So I consider that this is a little bit dangerous. And on the other side, we have free will. After we watch this movie, people were so keen, so advocate to talk, speak up, and to say release marine mammals, especially killer whales. So, what do we know about killer whales? In this webinar, what I want to share to you is a small glimpse of biology, ecology, a little bit of classification because it's killer whales are pretty messy in terms of how we can classify them, and of course the threats that they have been facing since the last years and the conservation efforts. So I want to start with this. Whales in general, whales is a very common name, but the big order is cetaceans. They're divided in two large groups. We call on the left side the mysticetas, which comprise the baleen whales. The whales we have baleen, and then we have here the fin whale, the blue whale, of course, humpback, and etc. Then if we go to the right side, we have the tooth whales, which are whales with real teeth, and they are called odontocetus. And here we have sperm whales, we have dolphins, we have big whales, we have pilot whales, and we have narwhals and belugas. And today we're going to talk about dolphins. Sometimes we say that dolphins are whale. So this is a very common name, but it's more accurate if we start to call them as dolphins because they are the largest member of the family of the dolphin family. They are actually dolphins. Why? Because they share a lot of characteristics in common: genetics, behavior, structures, and this is the bow plan or the common shape of and color of a killer whale. I'm saying this because yes, indeed, there are different types of killer whales. So we have here a fusiform shape that has these very iconic colors, black and white, very easy to recognize in nature, especially by the dorsal fin that I'm gonna talk about this later. And they have the eyes behind the mouth. They have this white eye patch above the eye. Yeah, when I was a kid, I thought that this was the eye, but no, it's not the eye. This is just an eye patch. Another characteristic. They have two rounded pectoral fins that are very, very useful to steer to the sides, and then they have this dorsal fin, which is really good to cut in the water, and then they have the fluke tail, which is very powerful in order to move the entire body, the entire mass. So we have these three characteristics that are going to be very, 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 very helpful for scientists to distinguish between the distinct type of orcas. Here we have the size and the shape of the iPad, and then we have the settle. It varies in coloration and in form. Then we have the dorsal fin, and something that it's really interesting about killer whales is that they reach the sexual maturity when they are 10, and they live, the lifespan is like between 50 and 90 years, very alike to humans. And killer whales, narwhals, belugas, and humans, they have something in common. They enter to menopause once they reach, in the case of the killer whales, the 40 years. So they're sexual available for the next 30 years. They only give birth one calf, and the gestation period is between 13 and 18 months. And sometimes they only can have one calf each 3 or 5 years. So this is just a glimpse of the biology of the killer whales. They display something that we call in biology sexual dimorphism. Sexual dimorphism is very common in different species, and it's going to tell us the visual difference between males and female. In the case of the females, they're shorter than the males. The males are larger. Males can size between 28 feet long and 31. In the case of the females, we're talking about more of 18 till 24 feet long. Also, another trait that is very, very different is the dorsal fin. As you can see, in the case of the females, is more curved back, and it comes in a very small size. But if you see the dorsal fin of a male, It's larger and it's in this isosceles triangle shape, very pointy. And in some males, for example, they can size the equivalence of 6 feet tall. Pretty big dorsal fin. Um, when I was researching about killer whales, I was wondering if they're intelligent animals. And I think that was the wrong question because sometimes humans we discriminate animals if they're intelligent or not, depending on our own intelligence. It's very easy because sometimes we can say like, okay, if an animal cannot, for example, write an essay or a paper, no, it's not intelligent. But in nature, we have different types of intelligence, different types of senses. If you remember in one of the webinars I gave it to you, I mentioned a very interesting book about how the animals sense, and I recommend you this book because the name of this book is An Immense World. In that book, you can learn so much about the intelligence in animals and how they feel the things. And at the end of the book, you realize that, okay, maybe as humans, we are not the most intelligent species in the world. So in the case of the killer whales, they have the second largest brain in the animal kingdom, just behind the sperm whale. And all these folds that we see here, okay, in the right brain, belong to the killer whale. So they have more folds than human brain, which is in the left. And these folds, sorry, are just representing. They're used for many different activities that we're performing, like uh, control motions, also for memory and other types of activities. But it's so interesting that there's a specific organ that we have in our brains that it's amygdala that serves um, mm, to it's where we have the fears and the feelings. They also have this amygdala. These organisms they can feel, they can sense many things, and also they have in the cortex another structure, uh, island cortex, which is so acute, and they can with this region they can perceive empathy, they can perceive also compassion, self-awareness, and they're really good in terms of planification. So yes, planification is like if we're describing a human, right? But no, it is a killer whale. So going into that, I don't know if you know, but there's a sixth sense that humans lacking is the echolocation. Echolocation means that an animal is going to produce sound waves, and these sound waves are going to map what is in the surrounding. So this works very easy. The killer whale is going to produce a sound, and it's going to be amplified by an organ that is above the upper jaw, which is the melon. It's a fatty organ that is going to act as a resonancy box, amplifying the sound waves, and then they're going to be launched into the 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 space. And once they hit something, like for example, this salmon, this some ways I'm gonna bounce back to the killer whale, and they're gonna hit first the lower back. Why? Because the lower back is hollow, and all the sounds are gonna travel faster to the inner ear, and then they're gonna be transported to the brain. So that's how the killer whales they are mapping the entire place. So do you think it's fascinating? Check this out. Some scientists have conducted some studies and they found that some type of, especially bottlenose dolphins, they can not only measure and size what is in their surroundings, they can also detect the density of of the of the object. Yes, indeed, they can feel what is inside, for example, in a trash can, or they can detect, for example, when a pregnant female is swimming, they can detect that something is inside. So maybe this is the key why they are so specialized in their diets, but we're gonna talk this later. So this is how it works. They send the sound wave, they get something back, and then it goes to the brain. Fascinated about distribution. um, there's no other animal besides the humans and the rats that is widely more distributed than orcas. They basically are found in every single ocean, especially in high latitudes like in the polar circles. But also we can find these guys between in subtropic and tropic waters as well. So scientists have estimated that killer whales population in the globe are around 50,000 organisms. And in terms of numbers, here in the I don't know if I'm going to pronounce this word very accurate because it's very complicated in English, but Aleutian Islands here, the islands in Alaska, they have around 1,200 organisms. And then if we go to Russia, we have 900 organisms recognized, and then Norway 450. And then if we go to the tropics, in all this area, there are around 8,900 recognized individuals. And in the here in the Antarctic, sorry, we have 25,000 organisms. So somebody asked me, do they migrate? Yes and no, because although they move, they actually searching for food, and they just follow in places which are rich in prey sources. So yeah, I cannot compare this with the migration that is performed by the Arctic tern or the monarch butterfly or other migratory species. And then I'm going to go over this topic, ecotypes. Remember that I told you that we have different type of orcas. Scientists still are debating if we should be call them as subspecies, separate species or not. But these ecotypes have been described since the 70s, and ecotypes means that killer whales are completely distinct one from the other. They are morphological or physically have different appearance. They have different social skills. They have different feeding behavior, and also they're genetically different, right? So here we have the 10 most common ecotypes that we can find in the globe. So first of all, we have the resident ecotype, and this resident inhabits in the North Pacific Ocean, and this is the, as the name says, they're more resident and they're specialized to feed upon salmon. Which salmon? Chinook salmon. But I'm going to talk about the orcas that we have in the North Pacific Ocean later. I'm going to tell you more information. And then we have the transient ones. The transient, that means that they're moving constantly from one place to another. They are uh, they are the mammal eaters. They're well common found in this Pacific Ocean side, and also they are known because they predate upon different type of sea lions, of dolphins, and most likely whales as well, humpback whales, and they don't travel in large groups. The groups are reduced. I'm gonna talk about this group thingy in in a moment. And then we have the offshore. We don't have so much information about offshore because, as its name says, they're out of the shift platform, and they tend to travel in large groups. We're talking about 50, 100 different individuals, and scientists believe that they might feed upon fish, but most likely sharks. Why? Because the dentition, the type of teeth, are really good to penetrate the hard skin of the sharks. Um, but still, they're not well studied. And then we have in the North Atlantic the type 1 and the type 2. The type 1 is the ecotype that inhabits in Scotland, Norway, and also in Iceland. They're really well known because they feed upon fish, most likely herring and also salmon. And then we have the type 2. They predate most likely in on seals, sea lions as well, few dolphins, and then if we go to the south hemisphere, we can 5 different ecotypes are recognized in this area. We have first the type A, which is the one that is actually the largest amongst all the ecotypes. They can, like, the largest size that has been reported is 31.5 feet long, and because of their big size, they can predate upon minke whales and large marine mammals. Just, it's important to remember that these organisms will most likely eat, when they're attacking a whale, they will eat the blubber, which is a thick layer of fat that the killer whales have, and most of the whales, and the tongue and the lips. Really good source of fat and protein as well. And if we go to the type B, this is type B and type B small and type B large. They have very similar colors, and the reason is because they live very south in the Antarctic Circle, and in this place the nutrients are very available, and a lot of diatoms, which are microalgae, are dyeing their dead bodies into this yellow greenish color. So very unique. um, the large one is going to predate upon the seals, and I don't know if you have to watch these videos of a group of, I mean, this video is very common. I think I have a video to show you. They are organized and they're planning this attack, and there's in the Antarctic waters, and there's a innocent seal on top of the ice floe, and they're performing this formation where they are just using the movement of a wave in order to wash off the seal to the water, and so they can feed upon it. So this is the type of ecotype who performs this, who displays this type of feeding behavior. And then we have the type C, which is considered the smallest one. And if you see, the white eye patch is more elongated, and this is a very characteristic feature that they have. They feed upon fish. And then last but not least, we have the type D, which was discovered in the 50s, and it inhabits in New Zealand. And this just break the whole backbone of the rest of the killer whales, because if you see, the size of the eye patch is notoriously smaller than the rest of their ecotypes. And also the shape of the head is more curved, and the size of the dorsal fin is just disproportionate with the rest of their body. Okay, now that we are tuned with this ecotypes, killer whales, we're gonna talk about a little bit more of the North Pacific Ocean and what's going on with the resident. So, as the name says, in the past they were considered as resident populations because they were, I like to be seen more in the shore of the coast, but just very recently, remember that I told you they feed upon the Chinook salmon. They're so specialized in this that once, like, if we remove the salmon, they will have a lot of troubles finding their food because they won't switch to other type of fish, or it's not going to be easier for them because they're very adapted to hunt this. We have in the North Pacific Ocean, in the north, in North America, we have the North population and the South population. Yes, the South population is in California, Oregon, and this population is considered endangered due to the lack of salmon. All right. So then, if we go to the transient killer whale, these guys, as I told you, they're moving constantly, but now the roles are changing, and the residents are moving a little bit offshore seeking for salmon, and the transients are going a little bit closer to the coast because there's a lot of food for them. Transients are different than the resident because transients, remember, they feed upon marine mammals. I mean, they're more generalistic. Just, let's say, they can feed upon several items. Residents not. And again, offshore, there's not so much information. They might feed upon sharks and other stuff, but still, these are the three most iconic in the Pacific Ocean. So very recently, actually was this year in 2024, some scientists using genetic information, genetic tools, they said that we need to start to be calling the transient and the resident killer whales as different species, not as ecotypes anymore, because they have different, completely different behavior, different um, genetic composition, different habits. But this still is in debate because the community, the world community still need to approve this new proposal. So behavior. Okay, remember what I told you. They are animals with long longevity. They are animals with different ecotypes. They display different feeding behaviors. I'm gonna talk about this a little bit more in the next slides. But also they're so intelligent. So if we combine everything, what we have is this: animals with really strong social structure, animals who socialize a lot. Like humans, we like to socialize so much. We like to talk. We use communication as an important tool to spread not only knowledge, also skills, information. So it is the same with killer whales. So killer whales, they basically like to have a lot of interaction within themselves, because this is the way how they exchange, for example, different feeding tactics. Also have they plan when there are luring organisms. Something that they do very often is that they like to reach the water. They like to reach the water and they like to jump. They like to use the tail to slap the water on the surface. Sometimes they also like to have, especially males, the juvenile males, they like to have like intersexual interactions as well. Sometimes it's believed that they're just practicing. And they also perform this, something that for me is so fascinating, the spy hopping. Spy hopping, reach they reach the surface and they put the head out of the water just to look the surroundings. They perform this very often, especially when they're hunting. Seals are on the ice floes. And then something for me that was very funny is that they like to rub their bodies on the pebbles of the very shallow waters. This is very typical in the northern population of resident um, killer whales. They like to rub also against the kelp and against the pebbles. I don't know. I just thinking that maybe they're just scratching their bodies. They're itchy, or yeah, maybe we can wonder why they're doing this, but they do. All right. Speaking about social structure and intelligence, these organisms are sharing so much information, but the key is that once they born, they stay with the mother for the rest of their life. This happens in some ecotypes, not in all of them. Especially in the resident population, the offspring will remain with the mother for the rest of their lives, and they're very united. They will share so many information. And again, they sometimes, for example, they separate for a few hours when they're hunting or when they have this connection with other killer whales, but most likely they will travel together. They're very familiar, let's say, organisms. So how does it work? How is they have a social structure? Yes, they have. And here they have a type of matriarchy where the mother is leading their group. So we call it matrilineal, is actually the basic unit of this structure. And that means that the mother is followed by the offspring, by the sons, by the daughters, and they will remain with the mother for the rest of their lives. In the resting populations, in some, for example, some transient, the transients are traveling in very small groups, sometimes one or four. The adults, the males, are moving from one group to another, but this is another thing. So what happens, for example, if this um, matrilinear groups are associating? We have something that we call pods. So pods are just there are group of these matrilinear associations, And this is interesting because they are communicated by whistles, clicks, and post calls. And it is very unique because um, most of these spots they will develop their own language that we call dialects. Yes, their own dialects, and they're very unique. And these dialects are going to pass to the next generation, from the mother, and sometimes they will share this within the pods. It's very interesting because the pods comprise a different matrilineal, but these matrilineals are this group of killer whales are they share a common ancestor. That means that they in the past they were related. These dialects are pretty similar, and they gather just for different activities, and sometimes they also gather for mating purposes as well. So the next one is the clan. So the clan, um, again, we have different groups. This is a superior level. We have different groups of, of killer whales that are going to interact each other. They also exchange some of the dialects, not everything. The pods, they have a unique dialect, and here the pods are going to share um, some of the dialects, and they indeed have ancestor in common, but they are larger groups. And then the top um, the top level is a community. Communities, it's made out of different parts, and sometimes these parts are not related. They come from different ancestors. They have different dialects, but they like to gather to travel together. And sometimes they do also share different information, different communication skills as well. And this is interesting because in the residents we have three different communities, and then feed and ecology. Remember that I told you killer whales are considered as stuffed predators, and in my mind that means that they can eat everything they want. Yes and no, because remember we have different ecotypes, and these ecotypes will be specialized in different items. And speaking about specialization and generalization, in terms of feed and ecology, food consumption, it has its own advantages to specialize in something. That means that you will try to avoid competition. But what happens if the resources is not available for you? Your existence will be you will be put in danger. So journalists, they can eat many things. What happens if I don't have salmon? No worries, I can eat other thing. But that means that you will have more competition. So they can eat whales, dolphins, narwhals, different type of fish, sharks, squid, birds, and terrestrial mammals as well, like caribous or polar bears as well. And I'm just showing you some type of feeding tactics that they're using. As I told you before, and I've doing so much emphasis that they share with their pod, with their group, these hunting techniques from one generation to the other, perfection in everything. And this is very interesting because when they're feeding upon fish, they're using this echolocation very often in order to detect where the fish are, but also to talk within each other. But when they're hunting, for example, dolphins or whales, normally they don't do this because they don't want to scare the whales, and they don't want to produce these loud sounds that they will recognize as well. And this is a very interesting feeding technique that is displayed by the Norwegian population, the type 1, sorry. What they do is that they call it a carousel feeding tactic. So they lure all the herrings and until they are in this big bait, big bowl, and they trying to put it on the surface. How? They shine them with their white belly, or they're producing with a tail. They hit in the water and they're producing a lot of bubbles, and they hurting them until they reach the surface. And once they're completely packed, some of them will just run into the big bowl, slapping the herring, and those who are completely wounded and stunned will be eaten by the ones who are waiting on the not on the bottom, just below the bowl. So yes, they are so fascinating. And then I remember someone at school told me like, Eric, I just read that the killer whales they can play with their food. Is that true? And I was very eager to know the truth, know this information. Indeed, in nature, some organisms display this something that we call surplus feeding. They're actually um, intaking the organism. They're not feeding upon it. They just play with it. They just play. Well, this is something that we just interpreted by this action. But yeah, it's performed by different type of mammals, including killer whales. And if you ask me why is the reason of this behavior, I have no answer. Probably it's part of their interaction with other ones, supremacy, or just their testing. I don't know. It's very hard to answer that. So we have here poor seal who's used as a doll. Okay, so what about the threats? So in 1989, there was a huge oil spill, Exxon Valdez in Alaska. This costed many ocean lives. It contaminated so much the water, and it was one of the most important natural disasters in the last century. But this oil, these pollutants didn't affect directly the killer whales. So remember that I told you that they occupy the top of the food chain. Okay, so here this is the representation of the food chain. We have on the very bottom the primary producers, and then we have the primary consumers. Um, again, primary consumers, secondary consumers, and tertiary consumers. So when we drop pollutants in the water, these particles are going to be absorbed by the primary producers. So once they're eaten by the primary consumers, they will acquire these pollutants to their bodies. And if we escalate to the next levels in the food chain, we'll realize that there's going to be a biomagnification of the pollutants. And once they reach in this case, the resident orca, that means that these organisms are highly contaminated because they have been consuming a lot of pollutants. Why this is not a huge problem right now? Because these pollutants they tend to associate with fat acids. Therefore, they just go straight to the blubber. They stay there and they're not harming the killer whale. But what happens, for example, if we start to put the right jigsaws of the puzzle, what happened with the southern population of killer whales, the resident population, which is lacking of food. They don't have enough Chinook salmon, and they have to start to use their reserves to survive during these scarcity events. They will start to metabolize the rubber, and if this rubber goes straight to the circulating system, it will affect the whole health of the killer whale. So pollutants like heavy metals and other type of pollutants, pesticides, have been known to be affecting the system because they act like as endocrine disruptors, right? Affecting most likely the capacity to mate and to produce healthy offspring as well. So again, overfishing. When we remove the Chinook salmon, when we remove the target species that they were hunting for years and years, centuries and centuries, it's going to be a huge imbalance in their population for sure. They will have to go further. They will have to spend more energy. They won't have the ability to survive to this event. Also, fisheries are causing the diminish of certain populations because there are some of the killer whales that got entangled in the fish gear, and this is causing a problem. Remember that as marine mammals, they have to reach the surface in order to breathe. And then, of course, noise contamination. These huge cargo ships are creating a lot of noise, and if we remember that they use echolocation in order to communicate themselves, in order to locate their prey. If there's a lot of noise underneath the water, it's going to be really problematic. Scientists don't know yet what is the impact, the extent impact that is causing problems in the killer whales. As far as we know, we think that it's affecting a lot, especially in terms of orientation and when they're hunting, or even worse, when they're just resting. This is a huge topic. I'm not going to dive too deep into this, but orcas in captivity, I think we shouldn't keep these organisms in tanks. I mean, after I told you, they're pretty intelligent. They travel, they interact each other, they have a very solid structure system. They communicate a lot of skills. They are teaching the offspring everything that they have learned. Could you imagine if we decided just to put it in the tank? Like, of course, as some scientists have seen that the killer whales, which are raised in captivity, they have different health problems, including skin cancer. They develop different tumors. They have some fungus in their mouth because they're just basically feeding with dead animals. And some of the dorsal fin that's supposed to be completely stiff, they're not curved. So some scientists believe, some people believe that this is a sign of depression on them. So I think we shouldn't use animals to entertain humans. That's in my personal opinion is unethical completely. So conservation efforts, what we can do is we can protect their habitat. I mean, it's very complicated, and I was just thinking how we can protect their habitat if they're moving constant. I think if we are creating some reserves, protecting other organisms and protecting as well the organisms who are the killer whales are feeding upon them, that could work, creating more marine protected areas. We can also reduce the noise pollution. In some places, for example, now they're tracking the movements of the killer whales. And if you track the movements, you can, for example, use different. They can use different routes. The boats they can use different routes in order to avoid water disturbance. Protecting prey ability. That's for me the key. That's paramount. That we need to be aware that yes, although we like salmon, although we like herring, although we like different type of fish, we need to remember that we are not alone. And these are not resources that belong to humans. They are available in nature for nature as well. A lot of efforts has been done to do a lot of research and monitoring. The way how scientists monitor the orcas is by photo identification. They take a picture of the dorsal fin, sorry, here, and like these each dorsal fin display a different patterns. They have different nicks, different scratches, and also the coloration of the cell is different. So with this, they have a huge catalog where they can upload pictures of new killer whales, and this is good to compare where they have been and where are they going as well. Legislation and policy, some countries they have to have more, there need to be more concern about the protection of this organism. There are still a few countries like Japan, Indonesia that still are damaging. They're hurting killer whales, especially the fishermen as well, because they compete with the fish. Education and public awareness is very powerful tool. I guess like with presentation like this, or when we are in nature and we spread a little bit of knowledge, it's better than nothing. We also need to think about of reducing our chemical pollutants. It's very, very, it's so hard to do this because We are surrounded by plastic, and remember that I told you the last webinar, microplastics nowadays are everywhere, everywhere. They are the invincible enemy. That's how I like to call it. And of course, when some of these killer whales are entangled, they must be relocated and go through rehabilitation in order to help them out to survive after this situation. Conscious tourism is a great solution, yes, if it's conducted in the most ethical way. I like to tell when I'm guiding my trips, I like to tell my guests that we must be passive observators all the time. We don't need to be hugging the killer whales. We don't need to be kissing. We don't need to be taking. We don't. We shouldn't be thinking that we want to take the selfie with them. Let's avoid the egocentrism and focus in ecocentrism or ecotourism and less ego-tourism. Um, Animals are just there, and we need to appreciate them a lot because they have been thriving since a long time ago, before us. So we need to respect these incredible giants. And for me, that's all. I hope that you like this presentation. And if you have any comments, if you have more information and that you want to share, if you also want me to share more information, some documents, questions, whatever you want, this is my email. Please be my guest. Thank you so much.
All right, Eric, thank you so much. Now, before we start with the question and answer session, I would like to remind everyone that you can submit your questions via the question field in your GoToWebinar control panel. And if you are interested in traveling with NatHab, you can visit our website at nathab.com for trip details or give us a call at 800-543-8917 and speak to an adventure specialist. All right, let's get to some of these questions. So, at what age do the orcas start having babies?
Oh, 10 years. 10 years, but again, it all depends of the population because um, due to the environmental conditions, sometimes they might start earlier, like 9 or 8, and sometimes they might start a little bit later, like 11, but 10 is just an average.
So, since the children do stay with their mother, I guess most of their lives, what does happen after the mother dies? Also,
Oh, yeah.
when the children have children, do they also follow the grandmother, and do they stay generational?
Exactly. Suppose that the offspring will lead, like the equivalence of 4 generations will lead the mother. And although they will stop giving birth when they are 40, they're really, really important for the maternal group because they also are sharing so much information. They're helping a lot um, to the hunting process. They teach also these dialects to the next generations. So answering that question of what happened once the mother dies, they will follow another mother in the same group.
Gotcha. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So, does the pod just keep getting larger and larger with more offspring, or does at some point do they break off and form new pods?
That's a really good question. And again, it depends of the ecotype. For example, for the resident, we have pods like between 18, 20, 21 individuals. For the transient, for example, we have pods no more than 5 individuals. So it all depends of their behavior. And but yes, there also what I told you about this large groups are traveling the offshore are traveling farther. They might have more and more organisms, but normally a pod it's about 18, 20, 21 individuals.
Gotcha. Thank you so much. So, let's talk about the difference between the orcas that are in captivity or in the wild and how they react to humans. Are humans ever in danger from them?
Like in the wild and in
In the
captivity.
Yes, in the wild.
In the wild. So interesting. Um, as far as I know, there has not been a killer whale attack reported to humans in wildlife. Yeah. I was able to swim with it a couple of times in the past, not anymore. I don't think I would do it anymore, to be honest. But I think like the key is that remember about the. This is just my theory. The echolocation. They see through us. They know like our density. I think like this is one of the most important keys that they use in order to know if we are food or not, if we are part of the menu or not. And in my opinion, I think like because we are strangers for them, they're not considered part of the menu in wildlife. Yeah. As a matter of fact, in some countries, like for example in Norway, they also organize tours to snorkel with them. Yeah, this is interesting.
So how do they react when you do swim towards them?
Oof. This is just my experience. The first time I remember, I was just waiting on the surface, and then when they came, they were swimming towards me, and when they came, they were just going up and down, very adamant to be in front of of me. And once they reached me, they swam right below me, and I saw how two of them, they just turned aside just to check me out, and then they just swam away, and that's it. And in the second time, there was a one who was a little bit more curious, and came back towards me, and it was looking at me like this for a few seconds, and they just like swam away. I I have some friends who have also who also had these experiences with killer whales, and there's a video that the killer whale is just very very close to this person. The person is swimming backwards, and it was very curious, like who are you? What are you? And I was terrified when I watched this video, to be honest. And yeah, I just think they're very very curious when I see us. Yeah.
Do they ever prey upon each other?
Ooh, cannibalism. Good question. I was just reading a couple of articles that in very 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 extreme situations when there's not so much food, they might perform a little bit of cannibalism. It's not really common in this species, but they might.
Gotcha. Thank you. Um, so, can individual orcas be identified by color patterns?
Most likely by, remember what I told you of the photo identification, when they take a picture of this pectoral fin, the scientists will take the picture of this section of the killer whale, and they will just basically compare the scratches, the nicks that the dorsal fin sometimes have. This one has none, but yeah, like everything that you can see different is going to be used as like a fingerprint in order to identify each individual. Yeah, it's quite funny because in the Sea of Cortez we have a group of killer whales, and one of the big males is well recognized, and they baptize this as the if I could remember, and please, if my friends are watching this, please correct me, but the name of this is the Aztec, El Azteca. Pretty funny name. Yeah.
So, just to clarify, are orcas and killer whales the same?
Yes, of course. Killer whales and orcas. Yeah. As a matter of fact, people used to call them killer whales because they were killing whales. Exactly. But both names are completely correct. Orcas and killer whale. Actually, the name orca comes from the scientific name. It's Ursinus orca. That's why I also call it as orcas. But both names are completely correct.
Great. Thank you for clarifying that. So, do all members of the dolphin family use echolocation?
That's true. Yeah, all the members that use this echolocation. In the case of the sperm whales, for example, which are not dolphins, they have a very huge melon, and they really good echolocating. To be honest, they're really really good. But yes, they display this echolocation feature too.
So, how Do I watch orcas in the wild in an eco and in an animal friendly way?
It's very complicated. It's so difficult because they're moving constantly. I mean, there's always a certain time, a season where they approach more to the coast. For example, in the case of the resident population of the North Pacific, they will gather soon in summer as soon as the Chinook salmon gathers too. And also in Norway, when the food is available for them, we will gather in the Sea of Cortez. We know that it's more likely to see them, sorry, during between spring and summer because it's where the favorite food there, the mara rays, the mobile arrays are gathering the coast. So yes, it's like it's more likely to see them when when the food is available for them. And in my that's a really good question. What is the what how is the ethical way to do it? Always respecting the boundaries, respecting the distance. I mean, um, we need to use our intuition just to recognize when an animal is not feeling comfortable. Sometimes we just rule out completely or neglect that animals. They also will tell you when they feel comfortable or not. I mean, we don't need to be very intelligent just to discriminate when if an animal is on the surface swimming very slow and is not making a huge movement, that means that the animal is tranquil, is like very comfortable with the situation. But what happened, for example, if we are 20, 25, 30 boats chasing a pot of orcas, I mean, just the term chasing is telling us everything. They're trying to escape. They feel uncomfortable. So I think like what we're supposed to do always is we need to, if we want to do these activities, we need to search with whom we are doing this and also to search where are the places who are offering the best experiences in terms of more educational, more ethical, and what are they doing? Because I guess like with um, um, this new activity that has been promoted in Mexico, which I don't like the most to be honest, swim with killer whales. I think we're playing with fire. We don't know if something will happen because our need to swim with it and we need to take the best picture. Maybe, I'm knocking wood. I don't know if we're just going to swim with them in the worst moment where they are feeding or when they are just doing a specific activity. And if something happened and there's a killer whale attack, I can see this already in the news, like killer whales attacking humans, and something that will happen like in sharks. We will start to frame organisms like dangerous or not. This is just my opinion.
Great. Thank you so much for that answer, Eric.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that will be the last question that we do have time for today. So I'd like to hand it back to you for your closing comments.
Okay, so I think this is one of my favorite topics, to be honest, and I invite you to know more about these organisms. I know that all the people who are connected here are here for a reason. They want to know more, and also I think like we need to spread information, spread the knowledge, and be more self-awareness about uh, our landscape and that we are not unique. We are not the only people who are living and organisms who are living in this world. Yeah, that's it.
Eric, thank you so much for taking the time to
Thank you,
present
too.
for us today. And I'd also like to thank everyone who tuned in today. So if you are interested in information on how you can travel with NatHab, give us a call at 800-543-8917 or send us an email at info@nathab.com. Our adventure specialists are happy to help you out. Join us tomorrow for our next Daily Dose of Nature. You can check out this week's lineup, including registration links, on our website at nathab.com/webinars. We did record today's presentation, and we will have the replay available on our website soon. With that, I will conclude today's webinar. Goodbye, everybody. We'll
Ciao.
see you next time.